Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, let's start with it. Let's lead with the news.
Okay.
BuckeyeHuddle.com launches on Wednesday. Pretty exciting.
It is pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Now that you've said it, it has to happen. So
I said it on the morning show, so it already had to happen. This is just, maybe a little additional pressure, but
but the plan is definitely for Wednesday to be launch day. So I'm looking forward to full launch, front page, message board, back page.
If we're going to do this like a New York tabloid, everything's on the back page because that's where the sports is. So
That's true. So yeah, please check it out, BuckeyeHuddle.com. I'm excited to be back and doing like something like this again, and there's going to be tons of stuff there. So if you're interested in becoming a member, all of the information is there. Go check it out. If you are already a member, I don't know if you can be already a member yet.
I don't think
But
so.
we've got some registered people in there anxiously awaiting the opportunity to get in there. So check it out, BuckeyeHuddle.com. And now that is out of the way, Tom, I guess we should probably talk about the news of the day. Sophomore redshirt freshman running back Evan Pryor reportedly out for the season. We saw him posting on social media about alluding to an injury. And then it looks like it's a season-ending knee injury for him. A guy who we call him like the third running back, or the maybe he's like the third running back, but I don't know that calling him like a third string running back is totally accurate because they had plans for him. Mm-hmm. So now those plans go away. I guess if there's good news in this, it's that Dallan Hayden has been stepping up the last week in practice, but losing Evan Pryor will change things a little bit for this offense and what they had planned.
Definitely, because it does feel like, you're right, it felt like they had a role for him, and where, maybe it's a little like the tight ends, where you've got guys who, we talked a bunch about the tight ends on yesterday's show, and, G. Scott wants to be more well-rounded, but, G. Scott also is going to be more of a pass catcher than a blocker at this point. It felt like Evan Pryor was going to be, maybe a little bit of a change of pace back, but also, a guy out of the backfield in the passing game, maybe a little like Michigan used Blake Corum last year, or not Blake Corum,
Donovan Edwards.
Donovan Edwards last year, where just kind of not a ton of touches, not 25 carries a game or anything like that, but potentially a game-breaking type player out of the backfield. So yeah, this is definitely, obviously a bummer for Evan Pryor himself. It also, I have seen a lot of people panicking about the depth at the running back position, and there is not a lot of depth at the running back position. You're down to Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams and Dallan Hayden in terms of scholarship healthy running backs right now. You had some interesting stats though that you shared on, yes, you have, yes, it's, this is a relatively thin room, but also the fourth running back in the room doesn't tend to get a lot, so this means more carries for Dallan Hayden and maybe a bigger role for him, but other than that, not necessarily a huge shift.
Yeah, and since Ryan Day has been at Ohio State since 2017, I went back and looked, and beyond the third running back, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth running backs have averaged a combined like 28 carries a season. So once you get past the top three, there's 28 carries to go around for everybody else. And you would think that if that were to hold sway this year, that walk-on Caden Saunders is a second-year guy. Maybe Dallan Hayden picks up a bigger load. They've got other walk-on guys. So there are ways to get around it. And last year it was 42 carries for Evan Pryor and Marcus Crowley. So even in a big number season, like there are ways to handle this. My question right now is, people are talking about chip train them or this or that, and I think at this point it will be interesting to see if they decide to move somebody in case they need somebody down the road. Not for now. I don't think they need to move anybody yet right now, but I'm wondering if they decide to, like Xavier Johnson. I asked Tony Alford a week ago, like if you went to him, this is his fifth season as a wide receiver, he's looking at playing time, and if you went to him and said, we need you back at running back, what would his reaction be? Tony Alford said, like, when do you need me? Tell me what you need. What has changed since I've been there before? So, like, that's an option. Chip Trainum may be an option. Caleb Brown played running back some in high school. But I don't know. do you think they need to go to those lengths just yet?
I don't think you need to move anyone over there full time. Having Xavier Johnson potentially take some snaps there is probably not a bad idea. Chip Trayanum is, I think, on the running back side of things, the easiest, cleanest move because he has been a major college football running back for 2 years at Arizona State. But Chip Trayanum is also higher on the depth chart at linebacker than any of the other guys you're talking about at wide receiver. So it feels like I think everyone's immediate reaction is going to be, well, you've got Steel Chambers and Chip Trayanum, so obviously you can. It's like, no, I don't think Jim Knowles is going to go for that. And linebacker I think is a bigger concern than who is the fourth running back. If you're the third linebacker, you're going to play a heck of a lot more than the fourth running back is. So it feels like a Xavier Johnson would be a good option. Maybe a Caleb Brown, although Caleb Brown, it feels like you'd be potentially pulling him away from developmental time at wide receiver, which is where his ultimate goal is. Xavier Johnson is far enough in his career that I don't think Xavier Johnson is ever going to be wide receiver 1 at Ohio State. If he has an opportunity to be running back 4, or if someone gets hurt, running back 3, that probably makes the most sense to me as a potential move. But I don't think you need to move anyone there full time yet, because by the time those 25 carries that you're talking about, fourth running backs getting and fourth running back and below, those are not high leverage moments in the game. No. If you're the fourth running back, you're running in the fourth quarter against Arkansas State and Toledo when when there is a 40-something point lead and they're just trying to run out the clock. You can TC Caffrey, the freshman from Hubbard, or Caden Saunders or whoever it is. I mean, you just kind of fill the role with whoever it is, because those are not. This is not, fourth quarter against Alabama kind of carries. These are fourth quarter against Arkansas State.
Yeah, and I threw a percentage out there, and it's not exact, but I said 99.2% of those carries came with Ohio State leading by about 28 points. And I don't know if that's accurate, but it's probably pretty close. It's 20-ish points.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true, but it sounds true. So for our purposes, we're on the internet. That means it's good enough.
Right. It's rare that the fourth and fifth guy are getting carries when the game is still in doubt, and you certainly wouldn't expect it against Notre Dame. So I think moving Chip or moving Caleb right now would both kind of be similar, where it's like you need them learning their future position, their present position. Taking them away right now would be like, you go to Europe for a week, you're really learning everything, you're learning the language, and it's like, no, we got to go back to America because we need you to teach math or something. It's like, but I was, I was really picking this up. Now you're stunting my growth.
Well, and you look at the guys who have kind of ping-ponged around at different positions over the course of their career, and it's, DeMario McCall or, Jake Seibert just jumped. That was happening a lot with Cade Stover earlier in his career. And now, they got to the point with Cade Stover, it was like, all right, look, we have to pick a spot for you. We are not doing you any favors by ping-ponging you around and making you learn different stuff. So Cade Stover has his position now. He's a tight end, period, end of story. It feels like doing that for someone who is, potentially going to be an impact player for you at their current position this year, next year, whatever it is, it's not in your best interest to do that. That is like the perfect time for the perfect time for a Xavier Johnson type player to do it. That was like DeMario McCall last year. When they needed a corner last year, they didn't pull, Jaden Ballard to go do it.
Right.
They pulled DeMario McCall because DeMario McCall was entering his final season. You kind of were at a point where, okay, this is not someone who's going to win the Biletnikoff Award in 2 years. So, this is the reason you're doing this with someone like that. And for Xavier Johnson, if it's an opportunity to get on the field, great, cool. Because, your point with Tony Alford, that is his attitude, is what can I do to help the team, and great, that's good for him.
But he's a guy who may be wide receiver 5 or 6, but still obviously going to do whatever he needs for the team. What this does maybe do is open up carries, touches for Tyleik Williams, which transitions us to the defensive line, which we talked to today. Larry Johnson.
Wait, so you're not projecting carries for Tyleik Williams? Because you got me all excited for a minute.
I'm not. It's a long season.
It is a long season.
15 games. You're saying 12. It's a long season. But the possibilities, this is an athletic group. But we did talk to Larry Johnson today, and a slew of defensive linemen, and there are a bunch. And just to give you an idea of how many, like I asked Larry Johnson, how many starters do you have? And his answer was, it depends on the game. Depends on what we want to do. And I've got a bunch, and I'm happy with them. And whatever I want to do, I can do. And so, they're 3 deep at nose tackle, and they're probably 3 deep, 2 deep at 3 tech, and then you've just got waves of defensive ends. So he's very happy. I think the most interesting thing that I got from him today is that Jim Knowles' defense, Larry Johnson has adapted to it. And that was a concern coming in when these two guys were getting, they both believe in what they do. And Larry Johnson was asked about being the lone holdover of this defensive staff. And he's like, well, I don't see myself as a holdover. I see myself as a defensive coach on this staff. And so they've gone to work to marry and adjust what the defensive line does. And I asked him, have you had to change what you teach for this system? And he said yes. And I'm like, would you like to go into depth about what those changes are? And he said no. But it's stuff that we've heard talking about from like Ross Fulton and our X's and O's guys, where maybe more focused on the run, which I think should be music to everybody's ears.
Yeah, and I think the last year's defensive line was not the biggest concern on the defense, and I think that's one of the reasons why Larry Johnson is still here while other coaches are not still here. And the recruiting at defensive line has been pretty consistent, so it makes sense that he's still here. But that was I think one of the big questions with retaining Larry Johnson was he has basically run, and there have been some variations, but he's basically run the same system for as long as people can remember. He's run the same system basically as long as he's been at Ohio State, more or less, with some minor tweaks. This is kind of getting into a little bit of a different situation and a little bit of a different system. And, it is not always easy to, go back to, like, Office Space and, Tom, what's his name, the Jump to Conclusions, Matt guy, asking the old guy to do something different. It was just like, whoa, that's not what I do. I don't do that. This is, I have my job. Why are you asking me to do a different job? Larry Johnson sounds like he has adapted to this much better than that, and much more cleanly than that. And that was, I think, just sort of one of those questions, because if you've been doing the same thing for so long and you've been successful with the same thing for so long, it's like, why would I change? My thing's working. Why it's not my problem. You leave me alone and let me do my thing. Yeah. Very much sounds like that is not at all how this has gone. Which is, that's what you need to hear at this point. And it's, again, this is the optimistic time of year. Everyone's always on the same page this time of year. Everyone's always great. Everything's always fantastic this time of year. Mm-hmm. The ball will get kicked off on September 3rd, and then we will sort of find out exactly how much everything is on the same page. But for now, I think you're hearing the things that Ohio State fans would want to hear right now. Yeah,
to borrow another Office Space reference, like Larry Johnson would be like, "Why should I be the one? Why should I have to change? He's the one that sucks." But no, they're. I would have asked Larry, like, were you apprehensive, or were you like a little standoffish in buying in? But he's gonna say no. But you wonder if there was any of that, and then you eventually get won over. Because one of the things that he said about Jim Knowles is that he teaches Russian coverage better than any coach he's ever been around. And so I don't know if you're aware, Larry Johnson has been around a long time, and has seen a lot of coaches, a lot of head coaches, a lot of defensive coaches. He's been in every defensive room, and is clearly really impressed the way that Jim Knowles brings it all together. And he seems rejuvenated again, Larry Johnson. Not that he ever seems down, but he did kind of mention, like, it's kind of like 2019 again, where you're excited by something new and you're seeing the results on the field.
Well, I think, you're seeing the results on the field, I think, might be the big thing, because you're starting to sort of get the testimony already to the changes, because you keep hearing, hey, the defensive line is really getting pretty good push in the middle of the offensive line. And we've talked about in the context of the middle of the offensive line, like, hey, is that a concern with the interior of the offensive line? Well, on the defensive line, things are great, man. They're getting some push in the middle of the defensive line. We keep hearing, boy, the defense is not necessarily dominating scrimmages, but at least holding their own against an offense that is widely projected to be the best in the country. After last season, after 2018, after 2020. If you're holding your own against I don't think that has necessarily been the case in previous fall camps. So if you're seeing, hey, all of a sudden the defense is holding its own against a good offense, much more so than it has in previous years, well, that helps, if there is any lingering, I'm not so sure about the new guy, that will probably help push you over that finish line as well.
Larry was asked about the Leo position. So they've got 3 guys there right now: Jack Sawyer, Javante Jean-Baptiste, and Pala Ienaoteote. He likes it. He's a 4-down guy, but he likes this. He calls it, I like these new tools, he said, and he's a guy that is always talking about filling the toolbox of his players and giving them tools to work with. He is now having, he's got his own tools that now he can utilize and be successful with. Some of the players being mentioned, Mike Hall, I think it's mentioned. Kevin Wilson started talking about him yesterday, saying that guy's no 3. He'd be a starter almost anywhere else in the nation. When Larry Johnson was told that, he's like, Mike Hall is not a 3. He's been working with the 1s and the 2s, but they're deep. So yeah, you've got Jerron Cage at nose tackle. You've got Ty Hamilton. You've got Mike Hall. Mike Hall called him a very good pass rusher. What was the quote here? Scary in space. So yes, I think any big dude like that, yes, scary in space.
Yeah, every time we talk about these second-year defensive linemen, Mike Hall feels like he's the guy who's sort of, whatever order the names get set in, Mike Hall is always the 4th. Sometimes people say JT Tuimoloau out first, and some people are more excited about Tyleik Williams, and boy, Jack Sawyer at that jack position, boy, you can, and Mike Hall is always like, and here's Ringo.
And the rest.
And the rest, yes. Here's Ringo Starr. Well, Ringo may be on his way to a pretty big season at nose tackle. There's always someone who during the course of camp you sort of hear the same name over and over, and you hear them from the offensive guys, you hear from the defensive guys, and at some point that starts being like, okay, this may be a thing. A couple years ago, that was Josh Proctor. You kept hearing about Josh Proctor, and then Josh Proctor in 2019 was making a pretty big impact as a true freshman that year. He was a guy who by the end of the season, he's on the field during the crucial end of game drives against Clemson in the Fiesta Bowl. You're sort of getting that vibe with Mike Hall, where he redshirted last year. He only played 4 games, and I was going through. Speaking of BuckeyeHuddle.com, the new website that you should join on Wednesday. Speaking of loud background noises.
Speaking of Buckeye Weekly.
Speaking of Buckeye Weekly, yes, I was going through photos from last year's game, and I was going through photos from the Indiana game, and I'm like, boy, I've got a lot of photos of Mike Hall just wreaking havoc, and so there's lots of Mike Hall photos in the site library. So just so you know, when you're writing your Mike Hall stories this week, that'll be good. But BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will all, he didn't play a ton last year, but when he did, it was like, oh, he's out there doing stuff. And it was, it's against Akron and against Indiana, but he's a true freshman, and is the guy who's sort of getting forgotten. You just get the sense that, well, he might not be the 4th guy who's mentioned in that group for too long.
And he can also play 3-tech, so he can do whatever. Larry compared his quickness to B.B. Landers.
That is high praise.
Yeah, but I added but he's taller than BB's. Yes, he's a little bit taller than BB Landers. Talking about Tyleik Williams, you mentioned him. Larry said he was a baby last year, just a babe, with one skill, rushing the passer. Now he's building up the second skill of stopping the run, becoming a more complete player. That's going well. Tyleik himself was talking about how he's changed his body, and so those two, we call them the future of the interior. With the depth that they have there, they're going to play a ton this year, but so are the seniors. And when you talk to these seniors, they want to play for each other. Talking to Jerron Cage, why did you come back? Well, obviously you want to improve your draft stock. You want to put better video on film. He has a son now, but he's like, I'm focused on my son and my brothers. Talking about all of these seniors that this is their last go-round. And you add in, this system, these young guys, but it's I think the seniors will dictate how good this unit can be. And, they've all been, I don't want to say underwhelming to this point, but they all know they have more to prove. and that can be a heck of a thing.
Yeah, you have the freshmen from last year who are now the second-year players, whether they're redshirt freshmen or sophomores, who are looking to make that big initial impression. And then you also have the guys who are in their contract years, whether literally or just a possible that's the Zach Harrison, the Taron Vincent, the Jerron Cage kind of guys, Tyler Friday. Those are guys who I think, especially at the beginning of the year, while the younger guys are still, there's probably still a little bit more learning to do, a little more development to do with those guys. Especially at the beginning of the year, you're going to be leaning on those veteran guys. And you're also probably at the very end of the year, in some of those big games, the guys who have played in the national championship game, the guys who have played in the college football playoff, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Tyleik Williams, Mike Hall, there I did it again, fourth. Promise I'll do them in a different order at some point.
What a hater.
The worst. Me, not him.
Yeah, okay.
Those guys have not played in the college football playoff. They haven't played in the Big Ten championship game. They played in the Rose Bowl, and that's a very high stakes game, but it's not the college football playoff. You haven't played a Georgia. You haven't played in Alabama. Utah was a very good team, but Utah was not. Utah is not Alabama, unless it's that one Sugar Bowl like 10 years ago. But you're going to need both the young guys and the old guys to be big playmakers. We've talked about those second-year players and how second-year players always seem to play a big role in those championship Ohio State teams. 2014, 1968, 2002. Yes, you had all those second-year players making a big impact in 2014. You also had veterans. You also had, you got to have your Steve Millers on that team. You've got, you need your veterans. You need your young guys. The second-year players are great. They're very exciting. Everyone is super hyped up to talk about them. But you need that Zach Harrison. You need that Jerron Cage. You need that Tyler Friday, the Taron Vincent, to kind of fill the rest of that responsibility.
Zach Harrison mentioned that he's not paying any attention to what people are saying about him, and he feels better about it. It's like he feels freer. It's like, yeah, when you stop focusing on the negative things that people are saying about you, it's a wonder where your mind goes and how much better you feel about things. Larry Johnson said that he's told him, every time somebody throws a brick at you, use it to build your foundation. I thought, is that a Zig Ziglar thing? Is it a wall calendar type of thing? But it was good. It made some sense. Tyler Friday, losing him last year, Larry said it was a big blow because they need that leadership, and he provides it. But when you're injured, you're in the back of the room. You don't really say much. Now he's a voice again, and so he's providing some leadership, and so those are two senior leaders who are ready to go, ready to go, and ready for the next step. And the year that they have this year determines how well they will do with their draft stock. Anything? Let's see.
JT Tuimoloau was also asked about, how do you feel about pressure? How big is it? How do you avoid feeling pressure? Because he's someone who 5-star, one of the services had him as the number one player in the class. I mean, you come in with big expectations. Ohio State is a program where you have a huge fan base. You get a ton of attention. You're getting national media attention. And, as a true freshman to come in and from day one in that Minnesota game be contributing in a meaningful way. And, at the same time, not get sucked into the, negative end of that where, people know your name and therefore people are seeking you out to tell you that you stink. He said, how do you avoid pressure? Well, stay off social media. Stay off social media. That has helped him, sort of avoid feeling some of that pressure because, external pressure, it doesn't mean anything. This is the version of if you wouldn't take someone's advice, don't accept someone's criticism that we hear here all the time. He said that's also kind of helped him stay grounded because you also have the people who are telling you are, 3/4 of the way towards being a deity, and it's like, well, that's also not true. So you're avoiding the highs, you're avoiding the lows, and you're just kind of trying to, win the day and get a little better every day.
Yeah, two final things for me. Great offseason for Taron Vincent. He's stronger than he's been, in better shape, so that's good. One last thing that Larry Johnson said the biggest improvement for players is in year 2. So as we were talking about those younger guys, maybe some good things coming their way as those 4 just round into I think a pretty lethal form. I wonder how often we will see them together because there's just going to be so much mixing, and that's That's why I wanted to ask about starters, to put it out there again. Like, this isn't a 1 deep. This isn't a 2 deep. This is a 2.5 to 3 deep in various positions. So guys will start, other guys will start, and don't get hung up on that.
Yeah, the stats, the start stat thing, I think people will look at that and go, boy, they have all these returning starters coming back. It's like, I don't know that means anything this year, because you're expecting so much from guys who didn't necessarily start last year, but, all those second-year players. Let's run through them, Tony. Mike Hall, Tyleik Williams, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau. It feels like the expectation on those guys is just... See, did it?
I'm going to edit this and put my call last.
I didn't know you knew how to edit podcasts.
Well, just the audio. Yes, I do.
It was, I think those 4 guys, it feels like they're going to be a real central piece of the narrative around this team, because everyone loves the breakout guys, the young guys breaking out, ready to become stars, the guys who you've been hearing about in recruiting, and this is the year it finally happens. You've got those guys, but you also have all those veteran pieces, and a lot of those veteran guys, Taron Vincent, Zach Harrison, these guys are 5 stars too. Yeah. And for health reasons and all that, they have not necessarily lived up to the external expectations for them, and probably some their own internal personal expectations as well. But it just feels like we've talked this week about some of the positions where there are some concerns with this program. The defensive line, man, unless we are being extremely misled about things, it sure feels like you've got all the pieces there, you've got the system there, you've got the coach there. It just feels like the defensive line is going to be one of the real strengths of this team. And when you look at the types of teams that win national championships, boy, a whole lot of them sure do seem to have very, very strong defensive lines. Yeah,
Johnson said on a lucky day, if he's lucky, they can go 12 deep. But he's expecting 10 deep regularly. So as the Gator drives by, that's going to go ahead and do it for us. Please, if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel that you're watching this on. If you're watching it, hit the bell, get notified when we go live or we drop new videos. And again, that site again, Tom?
BuckeyeHuddle.com. Boy, I had to think halfway through. I'm like, yes, Buckeye Huddle. Yes, BuckeyeHuddle.com.
That name again is Mr. Plow.
Yes.
So, all right, that'll do it. Thank you all for tuning in, Tom. Thanks for being here. Kevin, thanks for being behind the camera. Me, thank you for everything.
Thanks just for being you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Anyway, that'll do it. I'll talk to you guys later.